Hey guys, it's Rossbotnik, and as a kid who grew up in the burbs and never worked a day of his life on the farm, I really like farming simulators. Specifically the Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons games. Real farm life never really interests me. Maybe because of all the poop and, physical labor, but give me Grandpa's old farm with some old tools and a dog companion and I'm good to go. I got started in the series with Harvest Moon 64, and then Back to Nature on the PS1. After that, I played Friends of Mineral Town on the GBA and Harvest Moon DS. Then got into the spin-off series, Rune Factory, where I kind of just fell out of playing these games. Back in those early days playing on the N64 and PS1, I remember about hearing about the new Harvest Moon, which would come out on the PS2, which was supposed to change up the series, but I never really got a chance to try it out. So I was shocked and delighted to find out that it had a PS4 port with trophy support. So I thought I'd give it a shot, since I haven't touched the series since the DS. So, what's Harvest Moon Save the Homeland? Well, Harvest Moon is a farm simulation role-playing video game series developed by Marvelous. The main objective of the games is to rebuild a run-down old farm and turn it into a successful one. Save the Homeland is a series jumped to the PS2, focuses on saving said homeland. See, the farm you inherit isn't the only thing that's run down, but the entire village is. In that 1 year, the village and the surrounding area will be demolished to make an amusement park. So, I'll have to befriend almost every villager to get all 8 endings and restore the old family farm. On the gameplay side of things, Harvest Moon is all about managing your time and stamina. Days move by quick and every villager has a schedule, so I'll have to get a good feel of town and its people so that I don't waste precious time tracking down each villager. Every action with a tool will use up some of your stamina. Work too hard and I might pass out, making myself sick for the next day. While the farm starts out empty and in shambles, it can be restored with livestock and crops that will produce goods that can be sold to make cash or given to villagers as gifts. Speaking of gifts, that's the main way to progress through the storyline. To trigger the next event, all the required villagers must reach a certain level of happiness from said gifts. But enough about that. I have to beat this game 8 times, so here's my path to the platinum. The game starts like any other in the Harvest Moon series. Your grandfather has passed away and left you his farm, which has fallen into disarray. I get a quick rundown of the farm before finding the harvest sprites, discussing how to save the valley. Apparently I'm the special, being the only one who can actually see them, and they beg me to help save the homeland. I accept their request and get introduced to their boss, the Harvest Goddess, who will show up here and there to usually point me on my way. The next day, the Harvest Sprites return to give me a rundown on my farm. First thing I do is go to the field and use my sickle to harvest some fodder. I get super lucky and find a power berry right off the bat, increasing my stamina by eating it. Then I plant the seeds I had in my tool shed and water them before leaving the farm. I forage around the town for a couple days until I can buy a chicken, and the first egg I get I put in the incubator. I've also been giving berries to Lewis, the tool shop owner, and putting any food I have in the dog dish. After a couple of days, the egg hatches, giving me my first chick, and trophy, incubation. A couple of days later, I find an event at the lake where Lewis gives me a flute I can use to train a dog. Speaking of dogs, the food I put in the dish has attracted a stray to the farm, and after feeding him for 2 weeks, he becomes my buddy and a part of the farm. I name him Tails. By that point, I'd also saved up enough for a cow and a milker, and had hatched a few more chickens. I used the flute and got my dog to do a few tricks and unlock the next trophy as well. Follow the music. I keep on placing new eggs into the incubator whenever a new chick is hatched. Before the end of the first month, I have 6 chickens and my next trophy. Chicken crazy. My gifting to Lewis is paid off with the next event, where we feed birds at the lake, and Lewis tells me of this bluebird that he saw. The old carpenter eavesdrops on our conversation, and interjects that it could be a near extinct species of bird. However, Lewis then isn't too sure what he saw. Around now, I've added a new activity to my daily chores, working at the ranch, brushing animals, milking the cows, and putting fodder in the feed troughs. I get a little bit of money, a small amount of milk, and eventually a horse of my own after a month of work. A few days later, I trigger another event, accidentally, where Tim, the small boy of the village, and wannabe archaeologist, shows up with a map of buried treasure. He offers to share it with me if I help him dig it out, but it just turns out to be some old toys of Bob's. This is a part of another ending storyline, so I won't be pursuing it yet, but I do unlock the next trophy, Forgotten Treasures. Exiting the previous event walks me right into the next one, where Joe the carpenter gives me a fishing rod, a great new way to make money. I start the summer by having enough money to afford a doghouse and commissioning the carpenters to build it. The next day I wake it and find Tails is a pretty happy pupper. My farm family gets larger as Bob comes to the farm with a horse that he asks me to raise. I obviously yes and accept Sonic as a part of the family. A few days later I trigger the next event where Layla and I listen to Lewis play his flute. The next day Lewis shows up at my farm and invites me to play the flute together. This gives me a little mini game to play, and after a couple of tries I get it down and trigger the next event. Our music attracted the bluebird that Lewis saw earlier. It drops a feather for us that Lewis thinks he can use to stop the amusement park construction, and he heads out. While I wait for Lewis, I continue with my daily foraging and farming. A day later, the next event triggers. This time, my horse's affection has grown enough that it will allow me to ride it. But this Gwen chick shows up and gives me shit saying I have a long way to go till my horse is good enough for the races. This is for another ending that I'll get around to, but I do unlock the next trophy. Giddy up! While waiting for Lewis, I saved up enough to have the carpenters upgrade my house. This gives me a kitchen, and thus the ability to cook delicious dishes and store food in the fridge. And unlock the starting to feel like a home trophy. Eventually, Lewis shows up, telling me that the area has become a sanctuary for the bluebirds. So yeah, the Homeland is saved, and the game ends with unlocking the Protecting the Endangered trophy. After that, I return to the game, which starts New Game Plus. I get to keep my animals, power berry upgrades, house upgrades, and inventory. Only losing villager progress. Alright, round 2. I wasn't a big fan of the fishing so far, so I figured I'd get it out of the way. So I returned to farming, foraging, and fishing, while gifting Joe the carpenter. After a week we meet up and fish. He tells me of this legendary silverfish that is said to live in the lake, and proving it's here could just be what it takes to save the Homeland this time. Another week goes by until I trigger the next event, in which I come upon Joe fishing at night and we both spot the silverfish, confirming its existence. A few days later I trigger the next event where Woody, yes that's his name, tells us that the silverfish will only reveal itself to those of true heart, and doubt that Joe could ever catch it, since he hasn't even caught a large fish yet. And the harvest goddess shows up and she's like, yeah, catch that fish! The next day, Joe comes up and tells me that the fishing rod he gives me kinda sucks. Which, yeah, no shit. Half the time I'm pulling up boats. So Joe asks Lewis to make me a decent rod, which I immediately pick up since there isn't a lot of things to spend money on anymore, and I have a small fortune saved up. I keep up with farming, fishing, and gifting till the summer, adding Kurt the carpenter to my list of people to gift. Once summer starts, my farm starts just shooting out trophies. First, with the birth of my newest calf, the total amount of cows I have is 5, and unlock the Mad Cow trophy. The day after that, all the feeding and brushing and talking is paid off as my horse has maxed out its friendship, and I unlock the riding partner trophy. A few days later, my dog also reaches 5 hearts, and unlocks man's best friend. And then a few days after that, one of my cows produces gold milk, the highest quality available, and a random event after reaching max happiness. This gives me the decent dairy trophy. After weeks of gift giving, Kurt shows up at my farm and asks if I can find some herbs in exchange for something. So yeah, I grab some herbs from the freezer and painfully hand over one herb at a time. Grateful, Kurt says he's got something nice coming for me. The next day, I get lucky while fishing and reel in my second power berry, increasing my stamina again. A week goes by until Kurt shows up with a new fishing rod, and thanks for all those herbs I gave him. He then roasts Joe by saying that I'm the one who's gonna catch the silverfish since Joe just sucks. Man, like, what did you do to make no one believe in you? This new silver rod is capable of catching the silverfish, but the bugger only comes out on the night where there's a full moon, so we gotta wait for the right night. Later on that day, I received my third power berry from the harvest goddess. See, for the last month, I started throwing a vegetable into her pond and she would grant a wish or a hint. And after doing this for an entire month straight, I get a power berry. During this month, I also added the harvest sprites to my list of people I was gifting every day. Before the month ends, 2 of the harvest sprites show up one morning saying they lost the other guy. But my dog is able to sniff him out, and the following day, they return with the power berry in thanks. After weeks of training, I'm now an expert fisherman, and my efforts pay off as I hook the silverfish. Joe then shows up to witness me achieving his dream. Poor, sad bastard. I hand it off to Joe to make the poor sap feel like he has something to do with all this. Apparently he's gonna send it off to a publisher. Okay, this publisher's gonna save the town somehow? A week and a bit later, the carpenters and Katie show up with a book mentioning the silverfish, so the lake is gonna become a reservation, and Joe tries to kid himself that his life isn't a joke. Okay. So the town is saved. Mark 2. Just 6 more to go. Alright, round 3. This time I'm going for the horse race ending, meaning I'm gonna have to be gifting Gwen and Bob as well as having my horse's affection maxed out. So on the 5th day, Bob and Gwen come to my farm and gawk at me for being able to ride my horse. You know, that thing I got back in the earlier playthrough. 12 days later and they're back with Bob telling me about a horse race that the winner will host the following year, which will save the town apparently. Gwen does her little rival bit of declaring it will be her horse to enter the race, but, I mean, come on. The next day I get to try out the horse riding time attack. After several attempts, I'm able to get a time under 55 seconds and unlock Track Star. I slowly got better at the horse race, but it's just not good enough. If your horse isn't taking the perfect run, it isn't going to get the time needed. I I keep at it for a week until I stumble upon the next event. I go to Bob to train my horse, and there's Gwen talking shit again behind my back, saying there's no way I could ever raise a champion horse. And she might be right. I keep going at the time attack, and though I'm getting close consistently, I'm still not able to beat 52 seconds. Apparently, I'm good enough for Bob to challenge me to a race the next morning though. He's pretty easy to beat, and is about to enter my horse into the horse race when Gwen butts in, demanding I beat her before she'll accept my horse being in the race. Gwen wasn't kidding around when she said she's better than me, and makes me eat her dust over and over again. Just like the time attack, nothing other than the perfect route and taking every turn exactly at the right moment, or you're not gonna beat Gwen. So we race over and over again for a week until I get my perfect run and kick Gwen's ass, and she finally has to admit my horse is the best. A week goes by until Bob comes by just to tell me the horse race is in a week. Then a couple days later, Gwen comes by to give my horse some herbs to calm its nerves. Nice, but it's a bit too late. So the rest of the week goes by, and then Bob comes by and collects the horse. Apparently I'm not even going to be the one riding it in the race, which seems odd, but okay. And then a few more days go by until Bob and Gwen show up again, proclaiming that my horse run the race, so next year the race will be held here, and the village is saved from becoming Disneyland, apparently. And I get off to the races. Alright, 4th playthrough. Almost halfway there, and I'm really starting to get bored with my farm. The only things left to do are connected to the endings. So my farm has literally nothing to do except make money that I have nothing to spend it on except things I don't need. No waifus to marry, no festivals to win, no mine to unearth treasures, and all the other activities from the other Harvest Moon games are missing. So I gotta just keep going, but I'll probably go stir crazy with each playthrough goes by because there's just nothing to do but wait and talk to people and give them gifts. Yeah, but enough bitching. This time I'm gonna go for the golden potato ending. So I'll be gifting Tom, Bob, and Layla. So after a couple weeks of gifting Tim, I get the event which gave me the Forgotten Treasures trophy from my first playthrough. And then a few days later, Tim returns, claiming to have found a real treasure map to some place called the Sacred Land, and gives me a copy, so it's up to me to find the land. There's 2 ways you can find the Sacred Land, either through using your dog, or from the villager Dia. Dia? I don't know how you say that. I thought since my dog was maxed out it'd be easy, but after a month and a half it still doesn't happen, so I start gifting Dia to try to get her to find the land for me. Only for a couple of days later for my dog to actually get his shit together and sniffs out the entrance to the Sacred Land, next to the mansion. Tim shows up and he isn't able to figure out what to do. He'll have to come back another day, but I get to work and start tilling the field. And once I'm done, I keep beating the earth with my hoe until I receive my 5th and final power berry, along with unlocking superfood. So I plant the seeds in according to the stone tablet and spend the next couple of days watering them. Once everything is fully grown, I enter the Sacred Land to find a chest with some special seeds inside. Tim shows up and figures that the seeds might grow into something rare, enough to catch the attention of the news. I give him the seeds and he takes off, saying that he's got it. A couple days later, while walking through the town, Tim calls me over. The seed is sprouted, and a few weeks later, we find out that the flower has bloomed on the plant. The golden flower causes Layla to remember that her grandmother told her about a golden fruit. Parsley is going to investigate this mysterious plant. A few days later, Tim lets me know that their fruit is ready to be picked. Picking the plant reveals it just be a plain ordinary potato. Woody and Gwen then show up and Woody calls it the golden sweet potato, food that the settlers ate years ago. Parsley confirms that this is said legendary potato. Overjoyed at our discovery, the villagers decide to have a festival soon. Not long after, everyone shows up to share some food. Parsley shows up to save the day. He's given a sample to a scientist who will want to study the plant. So boom, village is saved from Disney World, and I get Feed the Hungry. Okay, 5th playthrough. I can do this. This time I go for the cake cooking ending, so I'll have to befriend Katie and have a golden milk and eggs, something I acquired long ago. A couple days in, and Katie tells me she wants to make the cake my grandmother used to make. Her grandfather said it's the best in the world, but she's missing the recipe. Gwen ambushes me and tells me not to help Katie because she thinks Katie wants to move away, and Gwen knows what's best for everyone apparently. She thinks she's just sad about that timeline that my horse beat her. I check the dresser in my house, and it reveals that Grandma's cake recipe is inside, so I hand it over to Katie. She's got everything except the aforementioned golden milk and egg, as well as something called a moondrop dew. I go to the manor where Dia reveals she heard about the moondrop dew in a book, and gives it to me. So after a failed attempt at the cake, Katie goes over the book and discovers how to make a moon drop dew. But we'll have to wait till the next full moon. So I have to kill time till the end of the month to get my opportunity. When the time is right, Dia shows up, and we all get together to make the do. Weeks pass, then Katie and others show up telling me that her cake won the contest, and the contest wrote about the cake and the dewdrop. Since Katie's cake has been famous, apparently Euro Disney has been cancelled, and the village is saved again, and I get famous desserts. Alright, 6th run. I'm getting there. Going for the butterfly ending this time, so I'll need to befriend Kurt, Layla, and Parsley. A week into the run, I encounter Kurt looking for the azure swallowtail, a rare butterfly that if found in this area would make it a sanctuary. They're attracted to blue flowers, but that's all Kurt knows. The goddess shows up again to tell me that this is a good idea to pursue. A few days later, I stop by Layla's store and she tells me about blue flowers but doesn't know much about them. Weeks pass until Layla and Parsley show up with more info on the flower seeds. Parsley tells me they're called blue mist flowers and that with time he'll figure out how to grow them. A week later, they return with the seed. I plant the seed up at the goddess pond and have to wait for it for half a month until the flower blooms, and Layla assures me that the butterfly will come. A few days later, I find the azure swallowtail and Lewis snaps a picture of the rare insect. Days go by and the flower dies, but Layla digs up the seeds in hope of planting it again one day. Lewis then shows up to let us know that the village has been declared a sanctuary for the azure swallowtail, and I get float like a butterfly. Alright, 7th run. It's so close. I can taste it. This time I'm going for the goddess dress, so I'll be gifting Gina, Katie, Lewis, and Dia. So, after a week, Gina comes by the farm to ask me about the festival in the city where my character is from. Apparently the festival is replacing the robes and accepting submissions, and Gina is wondering if she could make a robe good enough, and I ask my help in finding out how to make a goddess robe. A couple days later, Katie comes by the farm to talk about making the goddess robe. She's gonna help design it. Nice. The next day I find Gina and Katie discussing the robe when Dia gets in the way and tells Gina her break is over and to find her scarf. And gives me the cold shoulder too. Next, befriending Lewis pays off as he tells me he stocks some silk thread at his shop, so I make sure to grab it. I then drop it off with the harvest goddess so she can weave it into something more useful. And after a few weeks, the goddess shows up with the rainbow cloth. I hand it over to Gina later that day. The next day I find another scene of Gina and Katie working on the dress. And then Dia starts digging at Gina until Katie defends her, making Dia run off and cry. I chase after her and she spills the beans that she's jealous of Gina's new friendship. I give her some head pats and she chills out and offers to help make the dress. Almost a whole month goes by until Gina and Dia show up at the farm with the dress. Gina lets me know she's submitting it to the festival. And a couple days later, Gina, Dia, and Katie show up to tell me that Gina's dress has been selected and has become famous overnight, making the village famous and safe, becoming Tokyo Disneyland. And I get the trophy, Finest Fabric. Final playthrough. Let's go. So it's the Weasel ending this time, so I'll have to befriend Gwen and the Harvest Sprites. So after a week and a bit, the sprites barge into my house telling me they've been attacked by some furious beast. I go to investigate to find it's just this weasel. And lo and behold, Gwen shows up to give me crap about it. She tells me he's an endangered species and I should just leave him alone. But then the goddess shows up and suggests using Snowball's status to save the village. A couple days later, Gwen comes by to talk about Snowball, but she still won't let me take even a picture of him. Only to come by a few days later with a camera saying, now it's okay. We go to take the picture, but Snowball's a no-show. A few weeks go by until Gwen is down to try again. This time Snowball makes an appearance and we get the shot. But Gwen still feels bad. A week goes by until Gwen and Lewis show up, and they send Gwen's picture to that publisher again, and now the land is saved for Snowball, and I get the trophy, Furry Friend. So with that, I unlock the Platinum, Savior of the Homeland. So, was it worth it? No. Don't get me wrong, at the beginning of the game, when I had animals to raise and house expansions to work towards, I was good, but those dried up way too fast. The other Harvest Moon games had so many other things to always be working towards, but this game just doesn't. And in a game that wants me to beat it 8 times, I need something else to do other than just give villagers every day. So I'm giving Harvest Moon Save the Homeland a bronze trophy. I can't really recommend this one except for the hardcore Harvest Moon / Story of Season fans. So that's my episode on Harvest Moon Save the Homeland. Have you played it? Or completed it? Let me know down in the comments along with whatever games I should try to unlock all the trophies in next. I'm Dr. Rossbotnik, and I'll see you on the next episode of Unlocked. Take her easy.